President Trump says bad things will happen if the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks don't produce what he calls a meaningful deal. The threat comes as the U.S. has built up its military presence near Iran. CBS News has learned top national security officials have told President Trump the military is ready for potential strikes on Iran as soon as Saturday. But the president has not made a final decision about whether to strike. The military rhetoric is ramping up on both sides. Iran's supreme leader earlier this week posted an AI-generated photo of the fort at the bottom of the ocean. Joining us now is Matt Gertken, the chief geopolitical strategist at BCA Research. Matt, we appreciate your time today. Do you think we are headed for a military conflict in the coming days?
Well, thanks, Mugo. I think the key is to remember that we're already in a war with Iran. Operation Midnight Hammer bombed their nuclear program and a lot of their missile capacity last June. And so that's an ongoing, continuous process. The other thing is, if you recall, there were two Iranian-backed assassination attempts against President Trump, an Afghan and Pakistani national. So this has been intensifying for quite a while. The other thing is that the U.S. is trying to, prevent nuclear proliferation, and so they're demanding that at this critical vulnerability for the Iranian regime, that it swear off nuclear program forever.
So, in your experience, your expertise, what do you think it will take to prevent this from getting worse or from escalating even further?
Well, that's the problem. That the U.S. is demanding effectively unconditional surrender, give up the nuclear program, give up the ballistic missile program, and then also really reform the economy, let American investors in and open up to the outside world. The Iranians can't really give any of these things. In particular, they're worried if they give up their deterrence, their missile program or regional influence, that next year the U.S. could come and shake them down again and demand regime change. So basically, they're not willing to give up their defensive capacity, and the U.S. is saying that and clearly willing to use force in order to get in policy change and ultimately hegemony in the Middle East.
I kind of want to follow up on that and ask you this, because I'm personally curious. Is it normal to ask any independent nation to give up its ability to protect itself?
No, I mean, no, that's a state of war. And of course, the U.S. and Iran have been really at a state of war for many years, ever since the Beirut bombings in 1983. So the U.S. doesn't really see this regime as legitimate. But this is really a geopolitical issue, that we're getting to real reality rather than international law here. Yeah. And the issue is, it's the vulnerability of Iran. It's a power vacuum. They're so weak. They're so vulnerable. They can't defend their own skies. Their economies collapsed. Their regime, is outdated, and the leader is 86 years old. So the U.S. and Israel just see an opportunity that they can't pass up to reshape the region and reshape their global interests.
So let's talk about the bigger impact here. Could these rising tensions have impact on oil or even the prices of oil?
Yeah, and the important thing to understand there is, to separate the oil supply and the oil price, because you could have a shock that happens and it just affects the price. But if you hit the capital infrastructure in the region, if Iran, for example, is attacking ports, pipelines, refineries, then that's going to be permanent damage for a while. Yeah. I think the key thing, though, is that Iran alone is not the issue. So often people will say, well, Iran doesn't really export that much oil, 1.5 million barrels per day or something. But we're not talking about Iranian production and exports. We're talking about regional. So the Mideast provides about 30% of the world's oil and gas, and they have the vast majority of the spare capacity. And so if it's a war where the regime is under threat, which is clearly the case, then the regime can lash out against regional energy to try to deter the U.S. from going any further and try to scare off future presidents from trying to topple the regime. And that's a punishment that would only be inflicted if the U.S. were acting anyway, or if the regime were falling for some other reason, like domestic protests.
Wow, that's all so interesting. Matt Gertken, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.